Welcome to the Standard of Truth podcast. In this podcast, Dr. Garrett Dirkmott and Professor Richard Leduc explore the early history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the life and teachings of Prophet Joseph Smith. They examine the original historical sources and provide context for events of the past. They approach the history of the Church with faith, expertise, and humor.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Standard of Truth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Garrett Dirkmott, and I'm joined by my friend, Professor Richard Leduc.
Hello, Garrett. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
That's wonderful, Tony. So I think that we've got a gajillion emails.
We've received so many emails. We apologize to everyone who's emailed us. We probably haven't responded, although we have read them all. We've read them all. But we are drowning.
We are. We appreciate as the podcast grows to fill all of from Spanish Fork all the way up to parts of Logan and Albania. We are.
I mean, I like to think that we are at least part of the reason why Spanish Fork is now a mission for the church.
It's true.
It's become a new mission.
Spanish Fork's a mission. Nampa, Idaho is a mission.
Isn't that interesting?
Interesting.
That that's your homeland. There won't ever be a Shelley, Idaho mission.
No, and Nampa was a mission almost a decade before we started recording.
But maybe Calvinist God knew that we were going to record.
This is true. It's been a great year. We're going to get into so now as people. There's a very popular podcast, many popular podcasts that...
Are you referencing ours?
I am not. Follow Him is a very popular podcast people are listening to as they prepare each week for Come Follow Me. And I believe this particular week we're really into the Book of Mormon. We're I think it's 1 Nephi, like 6 through 10 or something like that. We're going to do the 8 witnesses, the
introductory portion.
Yeah, so people are well past that, and we're going back.
So here's what we figure.
Anybody could just...
Yeah, no one's doing their Come Follow Me curriculum when they're supposed to.
Sure.
They're going to church first, having a conversation about it with Bill, the adulterer, who's still coming to church.
Good for him. Good for Bill.
Bill, thank you for coming.
Hospitals for the sick, Garrett.
Yeah, that's right. And then they're going back home and kind of restudying it and getting further behind. I feel like that's what's going on.
I think the main reason that people listen to podcasts is to, number one, be able to seem smarter in gospel doctrine, and number two, for their own...
That's the number one reason why they listen?
Well, number two is for their spiritual edification. It's a distant second.
So no one listens to our podcast for the first one then. Because how would they seem smarter?
That's the problem. We're missing that whole group of people. Our listeners are a procrastinating group that is just getting to probably the Book of John in New Testament. Come follow me.
Speaking of which, though, we did receive a text message from our one of the former members of our tour that we went on last year. She was requesting that her missionary son, well, actually, her son sent us the email. She didn't even request.
I have the email as well.
Oh, let's read his email.
Let's read the email and then read the text. I'm currently serving a mission in the Ivory Coast, and I'm loving every day of it. A little after I left on my mission, my mom went on your church history tour.
Yeah, it seems like you're struggling. Like, I know you always struggle, but you're struggling with the word church.
Church.
The church history tour.
Went on a church history tour. It's been very cold. Just walking into your house, my mouth froze. And loved it. She loved it. You know, what a great opportunity, by the way, just to mention, we've got a tour coming up in just a couple of months where we're going to be going to some of the same sites that this Ivory Coast missionary's mother went and loved it. Since then, my family has loved listening to the podcast. Recently, when talking to them, they mentioned that missionaries get premium podcasts through their missionary email. if this offer is still available, I'd be very interested in listening to your podcast. Well, Elder, I just sent that access over to you. My wife has been complaining about how she has to pay for the access to the
I
premium.
also have to pay.
It's true. I've chosen not to pay.
Well, you are the one who controls the content, so you don't have to.
It's true. But so, for Becky, my wife, who wants to listen to it for free, all you have to do is serve a mission. I don't know where your commitment's at, but if you wanted it so bad, why don't you serve a mission?
Well, so I messaged this elder's mother and said, "Hey, your son wants to sign up for the premium content." Her response was, "Yes, my husband's been listening to the podcast too, but I'm very close to banning him from it. It's like living with my own personal dream crusher. Whenever I throw out my own theological views, he's like, well, Garrett said ... So that's the Standard of Truth podcast, sowing marital strife for the past 4 years.
That's true. So getting into the Phoebe Draper mailbag, we have received an email here from Ren. I have been listening to you guys for several years now and enjoy it. I work in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska.
Wow.
Whoa. And live up. So
first of all, we have a listener in Prudhoe Bay.
We're huge in Prudhoe Bay.
Yeah, we're one of the top 1,000 podcasts in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, by the very fact that you've downloaded it.
100%. So Prudhoe Bay, by the way, it's a bit of a haul. It's I think an 18-hour drive.
It's like
to
if you lived
Anchorage.
in Canada and were like, I need it somewhere colder. If you live in Yellowknife and you were like, this is way too warm for me.
Yeah, that's right. If you wear Hawaiian shirts and shorts out in November and December, move to Prudhoe Bay. That being said, I don't get to attend church while up here. So, first of all, Ren, that is actually tough. You're there, you're working. The conditions are pretty brutal, I would imagine. But we've done some checking. We went to LDS building locator.
Because one of the services we like to provide people is how they can go to church.
That's true. In Prudhoe Bay. So there is a YSA branch that's only 49 hours away by bicycle ride. So, Ren, I don't know your age. I don't know if you're interested in perhaps dating. If you're married, I do apologize. But 49-hour bike ride, 12-hour drive if
it's not snowbound.
So, just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, in the winter, I am not able to walk the 2.5 minutes to my church building, so I kind of feel what you're feeling, and I have to get in the car and I have to drive there.
I think what we're saying, Ren, is we just need you to recommit.
Ren, you gotta want it.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe purchase a boat and motor or sail over to Point Barrow.
We have
where
tried,
there's a branch.
There is a branch there. We don't know actually how far it is to get there. We assume it's frozen over and you can't actually.
But then you can walk on the frozen water.
This is true. Anyway, that we're getting.
We're just trying to solve. We bring people solutions.
Since he's unable to attend church, I often listen to you guys as part of my Sunday. Well, you know what? Then go ahead and skip church.
Never mind. As long as you're downloading.
Having said that, while on my mission, I was given a blessing by my mission president. Part of the blessing, I was told to study the life of Joseph Smith. Where could I find information on his life that I could listen while driving for work? Any information would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, Ren.
Well, so that's a great question. Kind of a question we get all the time. I mean, one of the problems with convincing your listeners that sources matter and that you need to vet the sources of anything you're reading or studying is that they then ask, well, what's good? And so that's like the follow-up question that we're not prepared for.
Hey, so what if I really wanted to enjoy what I was listening to?
Don't. I mean, look, the best way to learn about Joseph Smith's life, honestly, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Anyone listening to this podcast can become their own regional expert in the life of the prophet Joseph Smith. All it would take is reading the Joseph Smith Papers volumes. Now, that is a Herculean effort. But when someone asks the question, how can I become an expert on Joseph Smith? Now he didn't. Ren's just like, I want to learn more. But I get asked all the time, how can I become an expert? Well, you've heard the 10,000 hours, right? I mean, the reality is all the research has already been done. If you were to sit down with, say, the documents series of the Joseph Smith papers and go through and read every Joseph Smith document and every introduction and every footnote, by the time you are done, you will know more about Joseph Smith than literally anyone you'll ever meet for the rest of your life. I'm assuming that,
Unless you come on the tour.
But even you might know more than me at that point. Maybe
true.
I'll be like, you know what? That must have been from volume 13. I didn't get as much into that one, But so look, that's not very good listening to on Audible, right? I mean, it's a reference book, and so you wouldn't get the same effect out of it. One good place to start is listening to the Saints volumes that the church has put out, which you can listen to on the Gospel Library app. Again, that would still be better read than listened to. And in fact, most history books are better read than listened to because that way you can examine the sources behind each of the claims that are being made by the historian. But those are pretty lengthy, and that would fill an enormous amount of your time. I could recommend to you my book on the translation of the Book of Mormon from Darkness unto Light, which is on the Deseret bookshelf, but it's kind of like their own little Audible.
Also, highly recommend the premium content that we make available here at the Standard of Truth. And if you say, hey, well, I don't want to pay, that's a ridiculous sum of money. You can either A, go on a mission, or B, we have a trial now, at least on the Apple side of things, where you can trial it for a week, hopefully forget about it, and then pay us for a year's worth of content.
Yeah, that's our business model. We need people to forget that they've signed up. Anyway, so thanks for the inquiry, Ren. I know a lot of people ask that. I mean, there really isn't a way to magically become an expert, but I love the fact that you're trying to follow on the prompting of your patriarchal blessing and
Mission President blessing.
Sorry. Mission President
He
blessing.
may also have
what?
been a patriarch.
We're going to need another email talking about the patriarchal blessing.
We'd like just a copy of your patriarchal blessing.
In fact, send it to us, and we can provide greater interpretations. But yeah, there are things that are available. There are fewer of them that are available and readily accessible via audiobook because the history format for audiobook is just not as good.
But I love Saints. I love just the great kind of narration of the whole thing. It's written very well for a person like myself that isn't an expert in history and is very enjoyable. So that's great, Garrett. All right, we have another email here from Preston. I just want to write and thank you for your podcast. I don't have any witty comments, but I've been listening for over a year. I currently live in Scottsboro, Alabama. Well, roll tide, and we're sorry for the loss of your coach. We think that what's going to happen with the Washington coach is he will essentially flame out in about 3 years.
They're not going to give him 3 years.
He will.
If he doesn't win a national championship in 2 years, he's going to be fired. If he doesn't go to the playoffs next year, he's fired.
Well, the expansion of the playoffs to 12 teams actually
that
hurts
benefits him.
Well, no, it hurts because now it's like, well, anyone can make the playoffs except for all the teams that I root for. But
yeah, like BYU's not making the playoffs.
No, not next year
or ever.
Well, maybe get lightning in in a bottle. We'll get
if Andy Reid leaves
Puka
Kansas
Nacua
City,
back,
yeah, Puka Nacua. He used all his eligibility, I think.
Well, we'll see.
He could petition for a COVID year.
But I don't know where Scottsboro is. It could be, War Eagle. It could be closer to Auburn. I don't know. But either way.
At Auburn or at Alabama, your coach is getting fired if they don't go to the playoffs this year.
100%.
Ask Gus Malzahn how that worked out for him.
So you have at least one listener in Alabama. I served as a missionary in 1996, 1997 in Scotland, Edinburgh Mission. First of all, that is a beautiful area, tough mission, but beautiful, beautiful. I love listening to your comments as it reminds me of my own missionary experiences. In one of my first areas, someone left the Truman Madsen talks on Joseph Smith. I listened to those almost every day for the rest of my mission. Don't feel jealous that I got to go foreign with an English-speaking mission. It either rained or snowed almost every day. Anyway, my son is serving in the Newport Beach, California mission, almost the exact opposite of Edinburgh, by the way.
Where it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. I would love it if you can share your podcast with him. I did. I sent it over to your son. Thanks for the work you put in the podcast. I look forward to each Thursday. Thank you so much.
An interesting way how the wheel of time continues to roll on. I mean, because if you were trying to serve a mission in Scotland, 300 years ago, the biggest problem would be that every single person you met would be so incredibly Calvinist that they would utterly reject anything you had to say.
Now they reject you for completely different reasons.
Yeah, just because they don't care about religion and you're a Yank. I mean, the reality is how quickly that shifted. I mean, to give you an idea, in 1828, it was primarily led by Presbyterians in Scotland, where Presbyterianism is founded, that the British and Foreign Bible Society was essentially forced to stop printing the Apocrypha in the King James Bible. So the King James Bible from the 1600s, from the time it was published, up until 1828, always had the Apocrypha in it, just like the Catholic Bible has the Apocrypha in it. Well, it was the Presbyterians of Scotland who were so adamant that this is not actually part of the Hebrew Bible. This is a bunch of Catholic interloping, that they essentially boycotted the British and Foreign Bible Society to the point where the British and Foreign Bible Society said, well, we can't do this. And they just gave up and they stopped printing Bibles with the Apocrypha in it.
So if Scotland were to boycott the printing of Bibles now, that would be essentially like 7 or 8 Bibles that wouldn't be going?
I feel like if Scotland were to boycott the printing of Bibles now, it would be because of green initiatives. Like we can't have pages of trees devoted to this.
But my point is that if they boycotted, then there would be 8 less Bibles that they would have to
there
print.
would not be a whole lot of impact. It's fascinating. One could make the argument, and maybe you need to listen to our premium content to, kind of see some of our discussion of this. But one could make the argument that Calvinism and Calvinistic theology is very powerful up front, but for a variety of reasons ends up kind of being a flash in the pan. I mean, it's
a flash in the 300-year pan.
Well, I mean, for Christianity's sake, yeah. I mean, the fact, I'm not saying that it goes away, but the fact that look at the inability of it to maintain its devoted followers. And there can be all kinds of reasons to discuss that. Look, there's all kinds of hardcore Calvinists in the world today. But it's a pretty epic collapse of religiosity all over Europe. And okay, if I were a Calvinist in Scotland in 1800, and you said to me, well, you know what? By 2023, there'll be fewer than 6% of the population of France that attends Mass on a weekly basis. And I would say, yeah, because there are a bunch of Catholics who are, following the Antichrist. I mean, if you were a hardcore Calvinist back then. But if you were to suggest a similar lack of church attendance in Scotland, they would say absolutely no. So they would point to Catholicism as being the reason why people don't attend church. The reality is all over Europe, church attendance is through the floor, to the point where in most places it's far below 10% on a weekly basis. Back to the discussion with your son, it is a pretty awesome thing that having served a mission, you get to go watch your son go. I haven't had that experience yet, but Richard's had it twice.
It's pretty fantastic. I just talked with him today. My son, Garrett and I were joking. So my son gets home to attend the BYU. I think so. He gets home the Thursday of the first week. And I said, well, so if you get home, if your flight's early enough, we should be able to catch your afternoon classes. And
That's hilarious.
We joked about how funny it would be that I'd have to join him at his classes because he wouldn't yet be released. It'd be the most BYU thing ever that I've got to...
I could see the professor now asking, sir, why are you here? I'm his companion. He doesn't get released until later tonight.
That'd be great.
I guarantee it won't have been the only time that's happened.
By the way, just a quick look by our crack research staff. No religious affiliation in Scotland is 48%.
Interesting.
That is...
Like I said, so to show you how quickly that movement happens.
Meatball.
Now, I talked about this in the United States as well, right? In Joseph Smith's time, Vermont was the most religious state in the United States. It's now the least religious state in the United States. So look, religiosity certainly tends to move and change over time. At the same time, my response to that might also be Vermont was highly Calvinist. It was almost exclusively Calvinist in Joseph Smith's time, and now is not as religious.
Church of Scotland, 20%, Roman Catholic, 12%, other Christian, 11%, other religion, 4%, Muslim, 2%, prefer not to say, 3%. So
I'll bet the prefer not to say are super religious.
Yeah, super duper religious.
That's why they won't tell people. I'm like, and all I do is, I mean, the reality is we see a collapse of religiosity in the Western world. Certainly it's still there culturally, but it is something that's, it's something that could not have been foreseen when Joseph Smith is first talking to the angel or in the first vision. So
you're talking about over the course of a couple hundred years, but I know just even in my mission that there was an element of this where a person has a very religious and spiritual experience event. Harvest Christian Church was this huge. They'd have these huge events where they bring in tens of thousands of people, and people would feel moved by the Spirit, right? And then they just would kind of just drift into just complacency as it relates to their general sense of religious participation. I mean, it happened. I mean, happening over time, but I mean, we would see it happen just with individuals.
Well, and I think that's one of the real difficulties surrounding the fundamental nature of the Protestant argument, right? The fundamental nature of Protestantism is that salvation comes by faith alone. Salvation is by faith alone and grace alone, and that's it. And truth about God is found in the Bible alone. So while I might go to church so that I can learn more about the Bible, because that's how I learn about God, it's not essential for me to go to church. One might say, well, did the thief on the cross go to church? Obviously not. Although Jesus was giving kind of a Sunday school lesson up there. But I mean, the reality is fundamentally at its core, because there are no ordinances, because there is no works that matter, it becomes a pretty tough sell over the centuries that even though going to church has no bearing whatsoever on your salvation, even though any of the ordinances, whether it's the Lord's Supper or baptism, has no bearing whatsoever on your salvation, that I'm still just going to go because. Now, there are, of course, millions of Christians who do. But how do you account for the fact of the hundreds of millions of Christians who now don't? Secularization obviously is a big part of that. But again, if you were to ask a Christian in Joseph Smith's time, if you were to ask a Christian in 1829, or 1820, do you think Christianity is going to get to a point where most people don't go to church? They would make fun of you. The primary problem for Christianity in Joseph Smith's America was twofold. They could not train and ordain ministers fast enough, and they could not build church meeting houses fast enough. Those are the two problems. It would be like going to someone today and telling them in 10 years, Amazon won't exist. They would be like, like literally everything in my house I've purchased from Amazon. like even my children. Everything I own comes from Amazon. There's no possible way that that could be the case. That's how shocked someone would be. If you were to tell someone today, cars won't exist. I'm not talking about combustion engines. I mean any cars, even the electric ones, even Richard's precious electric car. That if you were to tell them, you know what, in 30 years there won't even be cars, no one would believe you. They would say, yeah, we'll have more energy efficient cars. Well, they wouldn't say cars won't exist, right? This is what it would be like to try to convince a Christian during the Second Great Awakening that Christianity 200 years later would be on life support, essentially, would be at the very tail end, the death knell of what was going on.
I can give you an example from business. One of my favorite books is The Innovator's Dilemma from Clayton Christensen, a recently passed away but very prominent business PhD professor out of Harvard. It's this idea of kind of the pace of progress precedes the market awareness of the need. And so the example,
all of our listeners just stopped listening.
Well, so the example,
Ren, I know you're looking for anything to listen to in Prudhoe Bay. Please come back to us.
Well, so the example, an example from modern day is Netflix and Blockbuster, right? So what happens is that this idea of saved by grace, and I'm talking about Blockbuster now, no longer about.
So Blockbuster is saved by grace?
Well, they better hope that they were. So the idea of being saved by grace creates in folks a sense of an apathy, right? And so you say, well, then maybe you were never saved by grace at all if you are having those particular feelings. But for Blockbuster, they had the opportunity in, I think, September of 2000 to purchase Netflix for $50 million.
And they're like, why would we do that? We own the rental business.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They laughed him out. 14 years later, they're closing all their corporate stores, right? And so you have a circumstance where in this innovator's dilemma where a certain company is going along, doing things that are in their interest that make sense, and you have these new things that bubble up that then create this particular conflict and then completely wipe this thing out. And Calvinism, to that extent, creates that issue. And so then what happens is when you have people that are disconnected from the church, that aren't meeting together oft to fast and to pray and to speak one with another, to fast and to eat brie and to pray and to speak, right, about the welfare of their souls. If that's not happening, then secularism and just general apathy toward religion in general creeps in.
Can you create a religious movement in which fundamentally church attendance is not essential? Even though it might be good and good for the soul and you do it because Jesus wants you to, it's actually the antithesis of all other religion that's ever existed. All other religion all over the world throughout the dawn of time, I mean, not back to Adam. I mean, after there was some apostasy and stuff, after Noah, right? The reality is the religion was all about the ordinances, if you want to call them that you performed. I mean, the whole point of religion in the ancient world was that you did things. That was the only thing that mattered, was not what you thought about Zeus. It was, did you kill a goat for Zeus? And if you killed a goat for Zeus, we're golden. It doesn't matter. You could hate Zeus. You could be sitting there all day like, that Zeus, he throws one more lightning near my cattle. I swear I'm going to go to Mount Olympus and I'm going to give him the what for. You could hate Zeus. And Zeus could know that you hate him. All that mattered was that you sacrificed to him. That's what religion was. Now, of course, Christianity changes this because Jesus is teaching that the blessings that you receive from following the Lord, from following God, are delayed blessings. It's not you worship God and therefore it rains. In fact, Jesus very famously says that God causes the rain to fall upon the wicked as well as the righteous, right? That sounds pretty normal to us today. That would be ridiculously radical to someone in the ancient world. What do you mean? The entire reason why I'm sacrificing the goat is so it will rain on my crops. And Jesus says, your Father causes the rain to fall on the wicked and the righteous. That what you did was not the determining factor. This goes all the way back to our discussion about the gospel of wealth. And so Jesus is radical in the sense that he's saying, you're still going to do right things, but your reward for those right things will be in the next life, not in this life. But right things still mattered, right? You still needed to get baptized. He's still telling people to get baptized. And the early Christian church, how you acted was certainly very, very, very essential.
This is part of the reason I think why Methodism and the Baptist Church is still very, very much alive and active. There's more elements of that than there is certainly in Presbyterianism.
Well, at least of today. Now look, Presbyterianism of the 1700s was as exacting a religion as there could possibly be. You could be thrown out of your town if you weren't living the gospel the right way. But the fundamental underlying theme that because it's by faith alone, because it's by grace alone, the church, attendance in it, the good works that you do, they are all essentially window dressing. They aren't essential. And when you have someone who's fully converted, when you have someone who is absolute dyed-in-the-wool believer in Jesus, yeah, you better believe they're going to go to that church even though they don't have to. But what happens when you have someone who isn't? Or to ask a better way for many of our listeners, how many of your teenagers would be fully active in going to church if you never told them they needed to go to church? Never once. You never once said, okay, hey, it's time to go. If you legitimately never even addressed the topic of them going to church with them, how many of them would still be going? Now, look, I know that some of you are going to email in and say, well, my daughter would. I know. Look, I know. I have a friend, one of my good friends from working on the Joseph Smith papers. He was a convert to the church and when he was 19, and his parents both were atheists. His dad was in and out of prison 7 or 8 times while he was in grade school and in high school. And he just felt this call towards religion himself, right? So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but the reality is many people listening, if you were to just not say anything about going to church this weekend to your teenagers, they would regress back to the mean, I'm guessing, right? So when someone's fully converted already, of course they're going to church. But if they're not fully converted, well, what's the reason that they go? Well, for Latter-day Saints, you go for other reasons, for other ordinances, right? We're building towards trying to go to the temple and get married in the temple. That doesn't exist in Protestant Christianity because there aren't any other essential ordinances. In fact, there aren't any essential ordinances. So I don't know why we got off on that Calvinistic tangent, but I know that everyone loves it.
No, it's good. It actually
Josh is going to be saying, I can't get away from this on the premium. Now I can't get away from it.
It's a perfect transition into the 3 and 8 witnesses, Garrett. What better way?
Well, so before we get to 3 and 8 witnesses, let's talk about the title page of the Book of Mormon, because we had some people ask about that. The title page of the Book of Mormon is something that I think many people are aware of because Joseph talks about in his history how it comes about, but we'll just kind of go over it. Now, the Book of Mormon's title page is such that some people thought that this was just what Joseph had written, right? The Book of Mormon, an account written by the hand of Mormon upon the plates taken from the plates of Nephi. Wherefore it's an abridgment of the record of the people of Nephi and also the Lamanites, written to the Lamanites, which are a remnant of the house of Israel, and also to Jew and Gentile, written by way of commandment, and also by the spirit of prophecy and revelation, written and sealed up and hid up unto the Lord, that they may not be destroyed. that they might not be destroyed. To come forth by the gift and power of God, that phraseology, by the gift and power of God, by the way, is the primary way that Joseph is going to talk about the translation of the Book of Mormon. He will say, by the gift and power of God, I translated the Book of Mormon. It's the primary way he's going to describe it. And the way he's going to describe it, I think, comes from the title page. By the gift and power of God, unto the interpretation thereof, sealed by the hand of Moroni and hid up unto the Lord to come forth in due time by the way of Gentile. The interpretation thereof by the gift of God, an abridgment taken from the book of Ether. Also, which is a record of the people of Jared, which were scattered at the time of the Lord, confounded the language of the people when they were building a tower to get to heaven, which is to shew unto the remnant of the house of Israel how great things the Lord has done for their fathers, and that they may know the covenants of the Lord, that they are not cast off forever. And also the convincing of the Jew and Gentile that Jesus is the Christ, the eternal God, manifesting himself unto all nations. And now, if there be fault, it be the mistake of men. Therefore, condemn not the things of God, that ye may not be found that ye may be found spotless at the judgment seat of Christ. Now, the interesting part of well, there's a lot of interesting parts about that. But Joseph's actually going to give us a commentary on that later on when they're working on Joseph Smith history. He's going to explain to listeners where that title page actually comes from. He's going to say that while they're giving their history, in the meantime, our translation drawing to a close, we went to Palmyra, Wayne County, New York, and secured the copyright and agreed with Mr. Egbert Grandin to print 5,000 copies for the sum of $3,000. In order to get a copyright in the 1830s, there were a couple things that had to happen. Not only did you have to apply for a copyright, right? So you'd send a copy of it to the Library of Congress. You also had to publish the title page a couple of times in the newspaper so that you're essentially declaring, this is my book, don't steal it. Now, of course, people are then going to steal it, but at least they had laws on copyright that had very poor enforcement of copyright law. It's kind of like speeding in Montana, right? There are laws on speeding, very poor enforcement of it, or at least it used to be. And here Joseph's going to explain, because he just referenced securing the copyright. Well, to us, when we read Joseph Smith history, we don't think, well, securing the copyright, what does that have to do with the title page? But in Joseph's mind, it's kind of cool. You can see this as they're drafting this history. As Joseph's talking about publishing the Book of Mormon and securing the copyright, the next thing he jumps to is, let me talk to you about the title page. Why? Because in his mind, what's connected is the publication of the title page was essential to get a copyright. So you can actually see the mind working there. He's talking about, oh, we got a copyright. Speaking of copyright, let me tell you where the title page of the Book of Mormon came from. That title page is going to be published in the Wayne Sentinel in June of 1829. The Wayne Sentinel is Egbert Grandin's newspaper. Now, when Grandin publishes the copyright, it's not a, hey, this is amazing, I can't wait to read it publication. It's in the June 26 Wayne Sentinel, June 26, 1829. Grandin publishes the title page of the Book of Mormon. The commentary that goes along with it is not something that they usually share with you when you go to the Grandin print shop. The reality is, we tend as Latter-day Saints to kind of hold Egbert Grandin on a pedestal because this guy published the Book of Mormon.
So what's about to happen here is that people all over the world, from Albania to northern Alaska, are thinking, Egbert Grandin, what a mensch. and you're about to say...
I don't know that they're using Jewish terms to think of him, but yeah.
What a guy.
Most of our listeners don't speak Yiddish, although Officer R does.
He does, yeah.
So this is so he publishes the whole title page. I just read the title page, so I'm not going to read it. And with the title page, he provides this commentary. Just about in this particular region, for some time past, much speculation has existed concerning a pretended discovery. Now, I don't know about you, but when you start off talking about the gold plates by saying it's a pretended discovery, what are you then saying?
He's saying that how does you sleep at night, Egbert? Well, on huge stacks of $3,000.
Yeah, well, that hasn't happened yet. So
he hasn't been paid.
No, this is
okay.
This
yes.
is
June
months before the
of
negotiation.
1829.
Yeah.
Yes.
His first commentary is it's a pretended discovery, meaning he's a liar. So the commentary is we have someone who lied about finding gold plates. And he goes on, through superhuman means of an ancient record of religious and divine nature and origin, written in ancient characters impossible to be interpreted by any to whom the special gift has not been imparted by inspiration. It is generally known and spoken of as the Golden Bible. Most people entertain an idea that the whole matter is the result of a gross imposition and a grosser superstition. It is pretended. Now, again, whenever you say it's pretended, that is not positive, right? So if I were to say, Richard is pretending that he will eventually get a PhD in business. I got that from his advisor.
Yeah, that's sure.
If I were to say that, it would be a huge slap, right? Well, he pretends to be a Christian. What does that mean? It means that they're not Christian at all. It's actually, for the 19th century, it's an even greater insult.
Right. You are saying that you're this, you're not this. So in addition to not being this, you're also a huge hypocrite.
You're a liar. You're a liar and also claiming that you're something that you're not, right? So most people entertain it as this gross imposition and grosser superstition. So superstition is an interesting terminology as well. In the 19th century, superstition was a very big pejorative. I mean, look, today you almost never hear the word superstition unless you're talking like, I mean, it almost always, I mean, I hear it most when I'm listening to like baseball or watching baseball games.
Yeah, not washing your socks. And...
Yeah. He wears the same jersey every other day. I think we actually had a Geico commercial or something with, a State Farm commercial with Patrick Mahomes' jersey never being washed, because he's superstitious.
Right.
So we use superstition today almost as like a lark. I mean, it's like I'm superstitious. I want to make sure I always, sit in the same spot when the Jazz play. I don't know why it would make any difference, but we use it as kind of it's a lighthearted thing. You don't take it seriously at all, right? Superstition has a much more pejorative terminology in the 19th century, in part because it was the way that Protestants described what the Catholics were doing when it came to Catholic Mass. Now, look, Catholicism was a religion of miracles, right? You've got the Virgin Mary appearing. You've got all these saints. How do you even become a saint? Well, you perform miracles. Many of the Protestant reformers came to argue that a lot of those things, them claiming that St. James has appeared to someone at a cathedral, was all just part of this superstition designed to keep people from realizing how corrupt the Catholic Church actually was. Now, look, I'm not saying I believe this. I'm not trying to be overtly anti-Catholic, but you know who is trying to be overtly anti-Catholic? All of the people that are in the Reformation in the 19th century. They are not even trying to hide their anti-Catholicism. And so much of the way that Catholic terminology was represented in the 19th century was the use of the term superstition. So
here, this is happening in June of 1829. you have the kind of the back and forth where they might be going to Rochester to print this back. When does Grandin decide? Do we have an idea of exactly when he decides?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you're getting there.
Well, I mean, maybe next episode.
Oh, I see.
No, I'm just kidding. Let's go to... I like the fact that not only are our listeners guessing, we did have someone send in a meme that we talked about the tangents that I go on. They were incredible memes. They were great. And also a pretty heavy shot at my inability to talk about what we're going to talk about.
These will all go on the fan page that we may or may not eventually get to.
And when we say may, we mean we won't. And when we say may not, we mean that. Let me give you the definitions of superstition. So again, we think of superstition as, I better not cross paths with a black cat, right? I mean, that's what you think. Or
right.
Again, I played sports in high school poorly, but I did, right? And so people would have superstitions. I had one. I had to chew a certain type of gum when I played basketball. Every game, I had a piece. I took it out. I always smelled it first. You know,
Big League Chew? What did you use?
No. I wasn't chewing tobacco. No, just
I love
extra,
Oh.
but it had to be the blue extra.
Oh, okay.
Blue extra.
Well, you want your breath to smell good when you're
Well, yeah. As I slap that ball out of bounds away from someone trying to shoot, I want them to. You know what? He's got good hygiene, and also he hit me in the head. So we think of superstition as this kind of thing like that. I mean, I'm really superstitious. You know, the bride shouldn't see the groom on the same day of the wedding. That kind of stuff. Here's the actual definition of superstition from 1828, Webster's Dictionary, from the time period that these are being used. So this is important because as you read 19th century things and they use that word, know that what they are referencing is something very different than what you think they're referencing. Here's the first definition, the primary definition. Superstition, excessive exactness or rigor in religious opinions or practice. Extreme and unnecessary scruples in the observance of religious rites, not commanded, or of points of minor importance. Excess or extravagance in religion. The doing of things not required by God, or abstaining from things not forbidden, or the belief of what is absurd, or belief without evidence. Think about that for a minute. Belief without evidence. Related to religion. We talk about the decline of Protestant Christianity. The way they are defining being too religious is believing without evidence. Kind of, it's the things hoped for, not seen. Anyway, here's the second definition. False religion or false worship. Third definition. The rite or practice proceeding from the excess of scruples in religion. In this sense, it admits of a plural. There's another one, belief in the direct agency of superior powers in certain extraordinary or singular events or in omens or prognostics. So the very last definition is basically the definition that we think of it as today, right? That there's some other power that's, I have to wear my Detroit Lions sweatshirt or they're not going to win their playoff game, right? That, first of all, if that were the case, no one should have that superstition until literally this year. I mean, at this point, there's no one who could possibly believe if they wear a Lions sweatshirt, they're going to win a playoff game. What is Grandin saying here? He's saying that it is a superstition. It's a grosser superstition. It's religious excess. It is false religion. It is made up. It is without evidence. That's what he's saying. It is pretended that it will be published as soon as the translation is completed. Now think about this. Here's how you know that Grandin hasn't yet decided to publish the book. It's a pretty weird thing to publish in your own newspaper. It's pretended that they're going to be able to get this published when you're the one who's already agreed to publish it. He goes on, meanwhile, we have been furnished with the following, which is represented to us as intended for the title page of the work. We give it as a curiosity. Now notice that's he's already said this is pretended, this is superstition, this is imposition. He's making it very clear he doesn't believe any of this. And then he ends it with that. We give it as a curiosity. That's essentially his way of saying, I'm publishing this because people are interested in this weird, crazy, made-up religious stuff, not because we believe it. We don't believe it at all. I'm mocking it. I'm making fun of it. But, we give it as a curiosity. Now, maybe the fact that he came out so hard against the idea of the book being published, maybe that is part of the reason why he hesitated to publish the Book of Mormon. We know that they talked to Grandin in the summer, sometime in the summer. They talked to him and tried to get him to publish the Book of Mormon. He says no. Again, I'm sure somewhere in his mind is, I already told everyone that it's made up and that it's pretended that it's going to be published. But then they go to the other printer in town who also says he can't do it. Joseph and Martin eventually go to Rochester, where they do find, eventually, after several, they find a willing publisher. And they come back down to Grandin and say, look, this is going to get published regardless. We're going to publish it in Rochester if we have to. And at that point, Grandin finally relents and agrees to publish it. The agreement to publish it, we know, happened sometime before August 11th, because that's when another newspaper is going to attack that agreement to publish it. But it still requires Martin Harris to actually come up with the money, as something we've talked about before on this podcast, that he has to actually literally put his money where his mouth is and put up the enormous amount of money to pay for the Book of Mormon. So when Joseph, in his history, is talking about getting the book printed, when he talks about getting that copyright, one of the first things that it comes to his mind is, you need to understand where that title page that I had to publish for the copyright comes from. I wish to mention here that the title page of the Book of Mormon is a literal translation taken from the very last leaf on the left-hand side of the collection or book of plates, which contained the record which has been translated. The language of the whole running the same as all Hebrew writing in general, and that said title page is not by any means a modern composition, either of mine or of any other man's who has lived or does live in this generation. Therefore, in order to correct an error which generally exists concerning it, I give below that part of the title page of the English version of the Book of Mormon, which is a genuine and literal translation of the title page of the original Book of Mormon as recorded on the plates.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so he explains, in fact, where it was, that it was on the very last leaf on the left-hand side of the collection of the plates. So that the title page declaring what the book is, that it is another testament of Christ, is not just, it's not just something that, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints came up with in the 21st century. That it's another testament of Jesus Christ is something that the title page itself declares to everyone who is going to read it, that Jesus is the Christ, the eternal God, manifesting himself into all nations. So this is what Moroni thought what the title page of the purpose of the book was. Not just what Joseph thinks that it is. Now, we wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the other front matter issues. I know there's nothing more scintillating in all literature than to talk about front matter. Everyone's like, "Oh, did you read the preface?" Oh, yes, we read the preface. The reality is, until I became a historian, I never read the introduction to literally anything. Did you?
I still don't.
So even after getting your PhD.
Well, I don't have it yet. As soon as I do.
So the moment
The draft or the dissertation proposal draft 3 will be submitted tomorrow. And so I'm excited. The feedback on that. I think I'm one draft away from defending the proposal.
The proposal, but not your dissertation.
Oh my gosh, no. Not even close to the.
Yeah. So the Wilson brothers can rest easy. You're not about to join their ranks.
No. I'm not coming for them. No,
okay, but soon.
Soon. Oh, so soon.
10 years from now.
I'm thinking December of this year.
Wow.
Defend the proposal.
Talk about superstition.
I haven't washed my socks in 3 months.
No, I mean the false without evidence prognostication of religion.
Also that, yes.
Well, so what we're going to talk about in our next episode is, again, we got some more email to answer, but we're going to talk about the 3 and the 8 witness statements. Now, as a little bit of a teaser, those statements were not in the front of the original Book of Mormon. They were actually in the back of the book. So in the original Book of Mormon, you read the preface where Joseph said, hey, someone stole a bunch of these pages from me and is going to try to malign this work. You then read the copyright information, that it was copyrighted. And then you read the title page that was the literal translated title page from the gold plates themselves, explaining what the book was. There wasn't any further introduction. There wasn't, let me tell you all about this book. Let me tell you how it was translated. You had Joseph's preface saying, someone stole 116 pages from me and their purpose was to try to destroy this work. And then you read the title page. You read this commentary that this is a book designed to convince the Jew and the Gentile that Jesus is the Christ. And then you went right into 1 Nephi. At the end of the book, when you finished it, you just finished reading Moroni's promise, then the statements of the 3 and the 8 witnesses were there at the end. And so we're going to examine those statements on our next episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Standard of Truth podcast, hosted by historian Dr. Garrett Dirkmaat. If you know anybody that could benefit from the material in this episode, please share it with them. And for more resources, visit standardoftruth.com. Until next time.